श्रीवत्सवंश कलशोदधिकौस्तुभस्य श्रीवासराघवगुरोस्तनयं ततश्च विद्यावाप्य विबुधोत्तमतां दधानं कुर्वे सदा हृदि गुरुं करुणाकराख्यं लक्ष्मीनाथसमारम्भां नाथयामुनमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां यो नित्यमच्युतपदाम्बुजयुग्मरुक्मव्यामोहतस्तदितराणि तृणाय मेने अस्मद्गुरोर्भगवतोऽस्य दैकसिन्धोर्रामानुजस्य चरणौ शरणं प्रपद्ये माता पिता युवतयस्तनया विभूतिः सर्वं यदेव नियमेन मदन्वयानाम् आद्यस्य नः कुलपतेर्बकुलाभिरामं श्रीमत्तदङ्घ्रिमलं प्रणमामि मूर्ध्ना भूतं सरश्च महदाह्वय भट्टनाथ श्रीभक्तिसारकुलशेखरयोगिवाहान् भक्ताङ्घ्रिरेणुपरकालयतीन्द्रमिश्रान् श्रीमत्पराङ्कुशमुनिं प्रणतोऽस्मि नित्यम् श्रीमान् वेङ्कटनाथार्यः कवितार्किककेसरी वेदान्ताचार्यवर्यो मे सन्निधत्तां सदा हृदि. In the previous lecture, we discussed about the definition of tattva, the two types of tattva, then the three types of tattva, and then 7 types of tattva. Then we went on to understand what dravya is. So, when we said there are 2 types of tattva, we said tattva can be what is tattva at the first place? Tattva is that which could be known. We said it could be of 2 types. One is dravya and one is adravya. Dravya is an entity which is subject to change. Adravya refers to properties. It is not an entity, right? Then we saw about what we had previously learned as 3 types of tattva. We said don't get confused between that and this. When we said tattvatraya, where one is jiva, one is ishvara, and one is jada, we said do not get confused. That tattvatraya will come inside dravya only. So in 2 types of tattva, we have dravya and adravya. Inside dravya, you have jada and ajada. Inside jada, you have avyakta and kala. In ajada, you have pratyak and parak. In pratyak, you have jiva and ishvara. In parak, you have jnana and nitya vibhuti. Some people identify it this way about jnana, whereas some other people say this nitya vibhuti should not be part of parak. Only jnana should be part of parak. Nitya vibhuti should fall under jada. Now we saw that way. Then we saw about the definitions of these terms. Now we are going to see about dharma and dharmi. What is the meaning of dharma and what is the meaning of dharmi? It is very important for us. Why? Because this dharma dharmi bhava is itself a concept, and several philosophies give differing opinions about these concepts. So let us look at dharma and dharmi. So dharma refers to the properties that exist within an entity. In this context, dharma does not mean dharayati iti dharma, not that dharma. We are not looking at the righteousness, sanatana dharma, that meaning of dharma. We are looking at a totally different meaning of the word dharma here. We should be very clear which meaning is being used where. So dharma in this context refers to properties. The entity which has the dharma is called dharmi. So we have to understand that there is dharma, which is property, and dharmi, that is the entity that has the property. Let us take a very simple example. Let us consider an earthen pot, ghata, right? We call it ghata. Now, this ghata, what does it have? It will have a specific size, it will have a specific color, it will have a specific strength. All of these become its properties. The ghata itself is the dharmi in this particular context, whereas the properties listed before, like color, size, and so on, they become dharma. Now, there is one property of the ghata called ghatatvam. This is very important. Vishishtadvaitha is a school of philosophy that distinguishes between dharma and dharmi. And it further says that one of the dharmas of the dharmi is the very nature of the dharmi itself. How do you define a dharmi? How do you define an entity that possesses attributes? Through its attributes. You cannot define an attributeless entity. You cannot define it. No, some people said we can very well define an attributeless entity. What is an attributeless entity? It is an entity that does not have any attribute. Then the Vaishnavacharyas ask, if it does not have any attribute, then that itself becomes an attribute. If it does not have any property, it means it possesses the property of not having any property. That is also a property. So you cannot have an entity that is void of property. Every entity would have, every existing entity would have existence as a property. And further, the very definition of that entity would also be a property. I hope this is clear because this is very important. If we say that there is an entity that does not have any property, some entity X is there which does not have any property, can it exist? Logically speaking, it cannot exist because not having any property is itself a property. It is an entity that has the property of not having any property. This follows from the definition of the word property. And the statement, it has a property which is the very absence of properties. That statement is meaningless. Since from the definition of the word property itself, we are arriving at a meaningless sentence, what we are looking at is an impossible entity. We need to conclude it that way. Such an entity cannot exist. Therefore, every entity that exists will have qualities. It will have properties. Now, these entities, how will you define them? There is a cow. Cow has properties. There is an earthen pot. The pot has some properties. There is the sky. The sky has properties. How do you define the cow? How do you define the pot? How do you define the sky? For you to define the cow, you need to talk about the properties of a cow. For you to define the pot, you have to talk about the properties of a pot. Correct? There is no other way to explain. Think about it. Let us say I am thinking about a cow. How do I define a cow? If I just say it is an animal, there would be ativyapti, because goat is an animal, sheep is an animal, lion is an animal, elephant is an animal, dog is an animal. If I say it is an animal that gives milk and is white in color or brown in color, there I would again have a dosha. I would have the dosha of avyapti, where there are cows that exist in some different colors as well. So the definition that we give, when you say definition, it has to very clearly define the entity. For you to be able to clearly distinguish the entity from other entities, you need to explain it in terms of its properties. A unique set of properties. A pot does not have life, it is jada. There is a wooden table in front of me. It does not have life, it is jada. There is a tree in front of me. That also has wood. Maybe its leaves have all withered away in autumn. There is a wooden tree. That is also there. How do you distinguish between all the three? All of them look brown, but one is brown and is made of clay. One is brown and is non-living. One is brown and is the body of a living being. There is a difference there, right? So, for you to distinguish one entity from another, you require a unique set of qualities, a unique set of properties. Without a unique set of properties, you will not be able to define an entity clearly. So, what did we say? We said every entity has a quality. You cannot have a quality-less entity. Most entities have multiple qualities. That was point number 2. Point number 3 was that the very existence of an entity defines the fundamental properties that constitute the entity. This itself is a property. For example, ghata has ghatatvam as a property. When I look at a pot, I call it as a pot because it looks like a pot. I look at something and I call it as pot. Why? Because it has all the properties of a pot. So the property of having all the properties of a pot is also a property. It follows set theory in mathematics. The set containing all smaller sets is also called a set. Yes, it is a superset, but superset is also a set. It is mathematical. So every entity possesses qualities. One quality that is fundamentally possessed by every entity is the very property of having the properties that define the entity. If we have understood this much, we can move on to the next point. Now, this ghatatva, we said it is a property, but it is a property of properties, right? It is not an ordinary property. Being brown in color is a property, we said. Being of a particular size is a property, we said. Be having a particular shape is a property. Being brown in color, having a particular shape, being made of clay, all the those properties put together which define that part, that full set also we called as a property, right? This is a property of properties, superset. This property of properties is called jati. Literally, the word jati means type. Jati means type. In our context, jati is the distinguishing feature of the entity. Ghatatva is our context, right? Ghatatva is a distinguishing feature of the ghata. A mahan, a great person. What would be the fundamental property of a great person? The property that defines a great person, greatness. So a great person would have greatness. A mahan would have mahatvam. A Hindu would have hindutvam. A kavi would have kavitvam. A ghata will have ghatatvam. So all of these, kavitvam, ghatatvam, they are all called jatis. So dharmas are of different types. One is jati. Then the individual components inside that jati will also exist. Correct? These are called gunas. Remember, we had seen about guna in the previous lecture. We had seen there is dharma, then there is guna. So dharma will itself have jati, guna, and so on. Here, the ancient Buddhists came up with a question. They said, you are saying there is something called dharma. You are saying there is something called dharmi. You are saying that dharma is different from dharmi. They are two different entities. And then you are establishing a relationship between these two entities. How do we understand this? What sort of relationship is this? Let us understand the statement. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma. This is a statement in the Upanishad. In this particular case, Satya, Jnana, and Ananta are referring to that Brahman which possesses the quality of Satya, Satyatva. Likewise, that which has the property of Jnana, and likewise that which has the property of Ananta. This implies that these are all some qualities of Brahman. Do they by themselves define Brahman completely? No. Brahman is different from the properties and is also superior to those properties because it has more properties. He has Ananta Kalyana Gunas. Ananta Kalyana Gunagana Mahodadhi, we can call him. And a large ocean of infinite groups, treasure troves of auspicious qualities. So, Parabrahman is superior to these individual gunas. Let us take the example of a flower. Let us think about a red flower. Now, the red flower would have certain properties. What are they? We are considering, let us say, a hibiscus. A hibiscus. What would be the properties? It has a number of properties. One property is that it is reddish. One property is that it is soft. The flower has petals, it is soft. One property is that it would have some kind of fragrance. So, when you take a flower, it would have properties like color, fragrance, softness, and so on. Can you call the color itself as the entity? You cannot. I cannot call red color as the red hibiscus. Color alone is not the red hibiscus. But inside the hibiscus, when I see red, it means I am seeing the hibiscus. Remember, a red hibiscus. Red is not the same as hibiscus. Hibiscus is different from and superior to red. Red is just a color. But when I look at a hibiscus and when I see red color there, that red color, when I'm seeing the red color, what am I really seeing? I am seeing the red hibiscus. This concept is called Samanadhikaranya. This property is itself denoting the entity that possesses the quality, that possesses the property. And yet, despite denoting, it is not defining. So, reddishness that is seen in a hibiscus will denote a red hibiscus, but will not define a red hibiscus. The definition of the red hibiscus would require much more. So, the property by itself cannot become the entity. The property by itself cannot become the entity. The entity is the possessor of properties. The property is just a property. The property cannot exist if the entity does not exist. If there is no entity, how will there be any property? If there is no ghata, how can there be ghatatva? If there is no mahan, how can there ever be mahatva? So, we should understand that the properties are dependent on the existence of the entity. The properties of an entity exist only because of the existence of that respective entity. And yet, they do not constitute the entity. They may be used to identify the entity, but do not necessarily define the entity. Being the possessor of properties, the entity is considered to be superior to the individual properties themselves. The Buddhas, the ancient Buddhas, they asked the question. They said, okay, you said there is something called dharma apart from the dharma. We asked, what is dharma? And you said there is jati, there is guna. Okay. Now you tell me, can jati have a property inside it? Can there be a dharma inside jati? Can there be a dharma inside guna? Is it possible for you to have this? What does it imply? Having a dharma inside jati simply implies that the jati, which itself is a dharma, is now possessing a dharma. It means there is one property inside another property. So the Buddhas asked, can you have one property inside of another property? If you say that no property can possess other properties, then you will not be able to explain the reality. You will never be able to identify any entity. You are relying on properties to identify the entity. How will you identify the property? If the property has no properties, you will not be able to identify the entity which is the possessor of the properties. Okay, what if we assume that one property can have another property inside it? There can be a dharma inside of jati. Will that solve the problem? No, it will not solve the problem. The Buddhists argued very beautifully. They said, you are saying you are a follower of Vishishtadvaitha. You are saying you are a follower of Vishishtadvaitha. You are saying in Vishishtadvaitha that a property can have another property. But guess what? If a property can have another property, then that property will also have some other property inside of it. So every property can logically be divided into other properties. That means you will never be able to define any property properly. Every time I see a property, every time I see a dharma, this dharma has this dharma, this dharma, and this dharma. Okay, what is that first dharma? Oh, that has this dharma, and that dharma. In this manner, you will keep on going. It will be a never-ending process. Therefore, it would be illogical. So the Buddha said, it is very illogical to assume a dharma that has another dharma. But if you say that dharma has no other dharma, then that dharma will not be definable at the first place. That will also create a problem. The Vishishtadvaitis answered this question. They said, every dharma does not have inner dharmas. There are some dharmas, like jati, for example, which will have a number of dharmas inside. There are some other dharmas which do not have other dharmas inside. Let us see an example. You look at a white cloth, a piece of white cloth. You are calling the color there as white color. Okay. So white color is a property of the white cloth. White color is the dharma of the white cloth. That is the dharmi. Now let us look at this white color. Does this white color, which possesses whiteness, it does not have any other property. The only property of white color is whiteness. So there are dharmas that have dharmas inside, but there are dharmas that do not have extra dharmas. Somewhere the limit is being drawn. So it is being useful. Take the example of a cow. Take the example of a cow. The cow is a dharmi. It has a lot of dharmas. One of the dharma of the cow is gotvam, the property of being a cow. So the cow would naturally have the property of being a cow. What is that property called? Property of being something. What is that called? We called it out. So Gotva is called a jati, the property of having the properties that define an entity is called jati, and therefore Gotva is a jati. It is a dharma. Which kind of dharma? Jati of the cow. The cow which itself is counted as the dharmi in this case. So the cow by nature is a creature that has gotvam. It has the properties of a cow. So depending on the jati, the exact meaning is taught. Further, some questions were asked. If I say this, that this can only refer to the dharmi as an entity. If there is any entity that I am referring to, the entity will always have to be dharmi. The entity can never be dharma. This is a question. So when I say this, I am referring to this plant, this man, this table. They are all entities. So the argument is that the word this itself can always refer only to the dharmi. And if you say something like this, in this manner, that is always going to explain the dharma. So, how are we to understand this? Bhagavad Ramanuja in the Shri Bhashya, he talks about a beautiful example. He says, if there is going to be a pratiti, if there is going to be the case where I feel that I know something, ghatam aham janami, I know the existence of this pot. For that, I should exist. Ghatam aham janami, right? I should exist. The ghata should exist. When I exist and the ghata exists, only then can I ever become a possessor of the ghata, the knowledge of the ghata. So for me to possess the knowledge of the ghata, I have to be there and the ghata also has to be there. If you say, I am not there, if you say, I am not there, ghata is also not there, then what is left in the sentence? Ghatam aham janami. Only the knowledge part is there. Ghatam aham janami means I know the pot. I am not there, pot is not there. What is left? No, that refers to knowledge. You cannot have any knowledge without the existence of the entity which can possess knowledge. This is very important. Now the Buddhas are questioning. They are saying, if you say this is of this type, that is of that type, there itself you are acknowledging, you are talking about dharma and not dharmi. We said, yes, the entity is dharmi, 100%, no doubt. But for us to be able to differentiate, for us to be able to differentiate the dharmi from other dharmis, I want to differentiate a pot from a table. What will I do? We have to understand that one dharmi can be established as different from another dharmi only by using its unique dharma. One entity can be established as being different from another entity only by referring to its unique properties. So, the property that is inside of the entity is only what is going to make it shine out as that entity. Therefore, every dharmi has a dharma. We should not assume that there are dharmis that do not have the dharma. Now a question was raised. So in Vishishtadvaitha, you are saying that dharma exists inside dharmi. Dharmi is the entity. Dharma is the property of the entity. But can dharma exist inside any dharmi at all? The Buddhas are asking. And they are further arguing. They are saying it is impossible for the dharma to exist inside a dharmi. It is impossible. In which kind of entity is dharma residing in? Can dharma exist inside any dharma? The Buddhist said, if there is an entity that does not have any dharma, it gets out of the discussion instantly. At the same time, if we say that the dharmi has dharma, then that dharma will have some other dharma inside of it. That dharma will have some other dharma inside of it. That dharma will have some other dharma inside of it. So you will get caught. You will get caught in an infinite loop of finding some dharma inside another dharma. So we have to understand that every dharma, every dharmi will have some dharma or the other. Now let us say we are to go study about these in depth. When we study these in depth, we will understand a lot of things. We are not saying that dharmi can exist without any dharma. But we are saying dharma exists in an entity that possesses dharma. So the existing entity would have a property. It is called dharma. At the same time, it is not adharma. This relationship between dharma and dharmi has to be absorbed and understood. We will very soon discuss the other creations. We will very soon discuss about Mahat, Ahankara, and so on, all the differentiations of Prakriti. We will see that. But for now, tell me, is whatever we went through clear? Do you have any doubt? If you have any doubt, we can check. This is unfortunately a dry topic today. We are talking about dharma and dharmi, the entity which exists and therefore possesses existence itself as a property and possesses the very definition of that entity as a property by nature. Such an entity would be a possessor of qualities. Can it be possessed by qualities? No. Yet it is known only through its qualities. In this way, we are to understand the nature of entities and their qualities. We said the very defining quality is called jati. Then there are other properties that are called gunas. We said some dharmas can have dharmas inside, but there would be some other dharmas that do not have dharmas inside. White color would have whiteness inside. Would whiteness have anything else inside? No, it will not. The Buddhist asked, can a dharma exist inside a dharmi? We think it is an impossibility. Our Acharya said, it is not an impossibility. Dharma can very well exist in a dharmi. You are not going to get stuck in an infinite loop because every dharma is not going to be a possessor of dharma. If this is clear, we can conclude our class here. If you have any question, please feel free to ask.
Swami, I have a question.
Yes?
You say that there are some properties which have other more properties inside,
Yes,
and there are more other properties which doesn't have properties inside.
correct.
So how to differentiate these two? How to know that okay, there are some properties or other properties inside, and there are other things which doesn't have inside properties. So how
How
to
we are
differentiate?
going to define matters? Okay, I will give you an example. We talked about whiteness. Now,
Mhm.
this is the time of the Shastras when they did not talk about the components of white light. Today, we know that white light has 7 components, correct? Yet, none of the components of the white light will be a fundamental property of the white light. Think about it. The white light will not be reddish. It will have the property of containing red, but it will not be reddish. It will have the property of containing blue, but it will not be bluish. Correct?
Yes.
So here you are seeing a case where there is a dharma, which is this white, right? White is a dharma. This dharma is itself having some other dharmas. White is having the property of including red but not being reddish, including blue but not being bluish, including violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. And it has the property of containing all of these 7. That is also a property, correct? The property of having 7 different, the property of having lights of 7 different wavelengths is itself a property. So it is not having only red or only blue. It is having all of those 7. That itself is a property. So there can very well be a property inside a property. But then there are some properties that will not have further properties. What is the property of darkness? It will be dark. What is the property of dark? It will be dark. That's all. What other property does it have?
No other, I mean, except dark, there is no other properties.
If you say the property of not being light, then not that is only called dark. So it is not a different thing. Dark means dark. That's it. Dark itself means that which is not light. That means dark. So it does not have any property inside of it. It is a dharma, but it does not have any dharma inside of it. You cannot divide darkness into 5 types or 7 types or 7 properties. What 7 properties will you give for darkness? You cannot give. So a dharma can have a dharma. Some dharmas do not have any other dharma. But every dharmi will always have dharma. A dharma can be there which does not have another dharma. But there will not be any dharmi that does not have a dharma. So some dharma or the other will exist in every dharmi. Is it clear?
Yes, yes, it's clear.
Any other question?
There is an other doubt also.
Yes.
You in previous class you talked about Avyakta. Usually we define Avyakta as unmanifested, but you said as Prakriti.
Uh,
So can you please
uh,
repeat?
we usually define dharma also in a different way. In today's class, I defined it in a different way. Why? Because the word has different meanings. Okay. I will give you an example. We are saying dharma is of different types. Jati is a dharma, guna is a dharma. We are saying this way today. Let me give you an example. In Manusmriti, there is a famous commentary by Medatithi. There, in his Manubhashya, he writes, न जातिबलम् आश्रित्य जनाः माननीयाः किन्तु गुणाः माननीयाः. People, janaha, should not be treated as respectable out of their jati bala, but their gunas, if their gunas are great, then they should be respected. Which meaning of jati was used by Medatithi? Which meaning of guna was used? Think about it a little. Janaha, people, they will count as dharmis, right? Person is dharmi. He has properties. Now, jati is a property. Jati is a dharma. Guna is a dharma. Both the words have been used in the sense of properties by the Bhashyakara. But the meaning of the word jati used by the commentator there is different from the meaning of the word jati that is used here in today's class. There also it is a property. It is a property of a dharmi. It is a dharma of a dharmi. Here also it is a dharma of a dharmi. Yet that jati is different, this jati is different. Get it?
Yes, yes. Here, jati and guna, which we talk about, what actually this define? I mean, what type of jati this is we are talking about?
See, so firstly, to answer your previous question, let me finish the answer to your previous question. When we said avyakta, we did not imply that which is unmanifest. Okay. We said avyakta has a specific meaning in this context. We said avyakta is defined as the prakriti, which is made of three gunas, and those which came out of that mula prakriti. Mula prakriti is called avyakta in our context. Okay, is it related to the word unmanifest in any way? In fact, it is. This Mula Prakriti later got transformed, right? You got Mahat, you got Ahankara, you got a lot of things. You had Panchabhutas, you got Panchatanmatras, you got a lot of things. So Prakriti transformed. Before the transformation, when it was in a raw state, there where we call it as Mula Prakriti, some people use the English word unmanifest. It has not manifested itself in this form. It has not manifested itself in that form because it has never not transformed. So the non-transformed form of Prakriti is called as unmanifest Prakriti by some people. We don't call it as unmanifest. We think such a terminology would be very confusing. So we say it is Mula Prakriti. Avyakta means Mula Prakriti. That's it. Simple. Keep it simple because our context is talking about dravyas, right? Now coming to today's jati, guna, and so on. Okay. Guna is a general property. Jati is a specific property. As an example, I have an earthen pot. Here, if it is of a specific size, specific shape, it has such properties, right? These are called gunas. But this earthen pot that I'm calling as ghata in Sanskrit, this ghata has a property called ghatatvam. What is ghatatvam? Ghatatvam is the property of being a ghata. So the property of being something, that is called as jati. The property of being something, the property of belonging to a particular category, that is called a jati. Brown does not mean belonging to the category of brown. But ghatatvam means belonging to the category of ghatas. Only ghatas will have ghatatvam. Ghata is defined as that which has ghatatvam. Ghata is not defined as that which is brown. But ghatatvam would itself include other properties, right? Assuming that all ghatas are brown, then brown would be a property. Assuming that all ghatas are made of clay, being made of clay would be a property. All of these would fall under ghatatvam. And ghatatvam itself will fall under ghata. Being the dharmi will have ghatatvam as a dharma, which is called jati. And this jati would have gunas inside it, like its color, size, shape, and so on. Is it clear?
Yes, yes. So the gunas can be different, but the jati will be the remains of the pot, right?
Yes, because jati is what forms the category that helps you to identify the entity. Ghatatvam helps you to identify ghata. Brown does not help you. Matlab, brown helps, but how much? So many things could be brown, but only a ghata can have ghatatvam. Get it?
Uh, yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Any other question? If there is none, I will conclude this lecture. कवितार्किकसिंहाय कल्याणं शालिनी श्रीमते वेंकटेशाय वेदांत गुरवे नमः।